Hello, everyone. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, along with Guy Benson, Molly Line, and Charlie Hurt. The big story tonight, Governor Ron DeSantis suspending his presidential campaign.
He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over.
Well, DeSantis is back in Florida tonight after canceling an event earlier today in Manchester. Fox Business correspondent Madison Allworth joins us live with more on the DeSantis dropout. Madison.
Kayleigh, the restaurant next to me was supposed to host Governor Ron DeSantis tonight and mark his return to New Hampshire. Instead, now it marks his exit from the 2024 race for president. DeSantis took to social media to announce that he was dropping out and to throw his support behind President Trump.
If there was anything I could do to produce a favorable outcome, more campaign stops, more interviews, I would do it. But I can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory.
Despite finishing second in Iowa, DeSantis didn't gain traction here in New Hampshire. The most recent polls showed the Florida governor with only 6%. President Trump, who had regularly mocked DeSantis on the campaign trail, showed appreciation for the governor's endorsement, telling Fox News Digital, quote, "Very honored to have his endorsement. I look forward to working together with him to beat Joe Biden, who is the worst and most corrupt president in the history of our country." Now, there were some DeSantis supporters who still showed up to the restaurant this evening, and they spoke to us. All of them were disappointed, but they also understood why he made the decision to drop out. One supporter telling us he's not sure who he's going to support now.
Absolutely will not support Nikki Haley. Her behavior in this race has been well beneath the Republican nominee, and Donald Trump's behavior has never been something that as a father of 2 young children I could support in the White House. So we're going to have to figure things out going forward, and I don't know who we're going to support, but it's going to be very difficult to stomach supporting either one of those candidates because they don't represent the values and the future of the Republican Party.
The decision to drop out did not come out of left field. Rumors started circulating Saturday night that the campaign may be ending when DeSantis canceled all 3 of his planned appearances on network Sunday morning shows. The campaign quickly tried to squash any talk about the governor pulling out of the race by saying it would return to New Hampshire to stump through the primary Tuesday. But those rumors, they turned out to be true. Ron DeSantis, who was once considered the front runner for the 2024 race for president, has now dropped out before the very first primary. Kayleigh?
Madison, thank you. Now we go to Martha McCallum, who just spoke with President Trump before his rally. Martha McCallum, you got the first interview after this. What did President Trump have to say?
Hi, Kayleigh. We did. You can hear the crowd is getting very excited behind me. They're chanting, "We want Trump." We just were downstairs speaking to President Trump moments ago to get his reaction, his first on-camera reaction to Governor DeSantis pulling out of this race. I believe you guys have a piece of that sound. You want to go to it?
Well, look, he worked very hard. It's a tough go, and he worked hard. His wife is a terrific woman. They both worked very hard, and he endorsed me. In dropping out, he endorsed me, so I appreciate that very much, and I think we'll do very well. I think we were headed to a very big victory on Tuesday, just like in Iowa, and I think maybe now it even gets to be bigger, because most of those people are going to go with me, I suspect.
So, Kayleigh, you can hear in his tone, I asked him a couple of times if he had spoken with the Florida governor. There was a lot of acrimony between these two candidates for a very long time. We know that President Trump felt that it was very disloyal. He used that word a lot about Ron DeSantis. There was a moment in all of this when Governor DeSantis was leading in the polls. In the beginning of 2023, he was #1 in New Hampshire. Now he was in single digits. He said there was clearly not a path for him. But I was very interested to hear that there had not been a conversation, no discussion, at least at this point, about campaigning together. I asked him if there might be a role for DeSantis potentially in his administration. He said we're not there yet in terms of that kind of discussion. So really no communication is the takeaway from the interview that I just did at this point, which is interesting. So we'll see where that goes. But he also acknowledged, President Trump acknowledged, and I think you're going to hear him do that again here in moments, how hard it is, how hard this process is, how much families and candidates commit to all of this. And I think, it was an acknowledgement that he understood if perhaps the statement wasn't that, sort of warm and cozy and endorsing from Governor DeSantis. He said in the statement, I said I would endorse the lead candidate, and that's what I'm doing. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see what happens between these two very strong characters, very strong candidates, Governor DeSantis of Florida and President Trump, who wants to be president again. Difficult relationship, to be sure, and today marks a new chapter in it. We'll see where it goes from here, you guys.
Martha, quick question for you. We heard the former president intimate that he will get the Ron DeSantis support. He got the Ramaswamy endorsement last Tuesday. Now he's above 50% in the New Hampshire polls. It appears that small single-digit block did indeed go to him. Is it your sense on the ground? Have you seen DeSantis supporters? Do you believe that DeSantis vote, 5-6% here in New Hampshire, goes to the former president?
I spoke with some voters this morning. We went to a bookstore in New Hampshire and spoke with a panel of voters, and they were split. One very strong DeSantis supporter said she would never support the former president. The other one said she would if DeSantis dropped out. I think there's a lot of surprise here in New Hampshire that it happened when it did. I think people felt like he would go through this race, and potentially he talked even yesterday, I believe, about building some momentum. There's 5 weeks between this race and the South Carolina race. So, I think it was a little bit surprising, but when you look at the writing on the wall in these polls, and no doubt what donors were talking about with Governor DeSantis and their own internal numbers, he felt it was time to leave. And we'll see if it becomes a unifying moment for these two men who, have quite a bit of history. But I think that you will see some DeSantis vote clearly go to Trump. They very much were in the same lane in many ways along the way here. But there is some DeSantis vote that doesn't want to see the former president elected again. So we'll see how it shakes out. The other factor I would mention, Nikki Haley, excited, obviously, to see DeSantis drop out. She says she's now got the one-on-one race that she wanted with the former president. She's been jabbing his age quite a bit. I asked him about that. He talked about the cognitive test that he has taken and believing that that criticism is off the mark. So that is getting spicy, that back and forth in these final days between Haley and President Trump as well. So we'll see what happens there now that it is a one-on-one race.
Martha McCallum, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Guy, turning to you, I want to pull up the numbers, and this is what I was saying to Martha. This is Real Clear Politics average. So this is, of course, before DeSantis dropped out. But you see Trump at 50.3%, and he's there because of a CNN poll, a Suffolk poll, a St. Anselm College poll, all of which came after Ramaswamy. 5 digits appear to have gone to Trump, which could give him majority support with the DeSantis tailwind.
Yeah, I think that I saw a clip earlier in the day of Nikki Haley announcing to her supporters at an event that DeSantis had gotten out of the race, and they all cheered. And I said, well, be careful what you're cheering, because there's a good chance that a lot, maybe most of those DeSantis supporters in this state, and you also look at other states down the line, might flip over to Trump. Maybe the likelihood being a little bit higher than going over to Nikki Haley, just in terms of sort of the values that they embody, sort of the type of campaign that they've run. DeSantis was trying to win over a lot of the MAGA crowd, and obviously at this point he was not successful in that and had to get out of the race. But it does feel that this is yet another huge moment of consolidation behind the former president, and what was shaping up, at least according to the polling, to be perhaps a significant win for Trump in this state on Tuesday night could become a real blowout, and this thing could be over soon.
In the Nikki Haley campaign, I imagine their argument would be something like, this is a state with 40% that is independent. We believe they'll show up. We believe the choice is crystallized. It's now a 2-person race. And look, South Carolina, the numbers may look great for President Trump, but Super Tuesday, 12 of 16 states have independents voting. I imagine that would be the counter.
Yeah, and voters here in New Hampshire really like to tell their own story, to be the ones that set where things are going and not to listen to those polls and not to be so reactionary to those polls. The most recent UNH poll that just dropped right before DeSantis left the race found that 62% of likely New Hampshire voters who selected DeSantis had Trump as their number 2 choice. So we'll see if that actually comes to play. But when it comes to New Hampshire voters, they love the comeback story. They're famous for comeback stories, most notably Bill Clinton in 1992, and that was a second-place finish, the comeback kid story. So the question is, does Nikki Haley, if she can bring it close, as some of the polling, specifically that UNH poll, had shown a little bit tighter numbers, not the 19 spread, but more of an 11 spread. If she can bring it close, does she get a story even coming out of this in second place? So we'll see.
You talk about comeback kids. I mean, footnote John McCain in 2000 beating George W. Bush. So that's absolutely correct. You know, Charlie, I heard Governor DeSantis on Friday with our colleague Neil Cavuto. My radar went up because here's what he had to say. Take a listen.
Would you support him if it looks like he is the party nominee?
Well, I signed the pledge. I'm never somebody that takes his ball and goes home. And so that's just how I am. I mean, I don't take any of this stuff personally because it's not about me. It's about a larger effort, a larger movement.
Less than 48 hours later, we have a Trump endorsement.
Yeah, no, and I guess the writing was somewhat on the walls after Iowa. That was a tremendous victory for Trump in Iowa and a massive disappointment for Ron DeSantis, obviously. He had banked everything on that and failed. But I think, you know, in terms of his speech, his comments today, his announcement today, I think that you know, more than his somewhat you know, his endorsement of Donald Trump, the fact that his realization that this is Trump's to lose at this point is, I think, a very clarifying statement. And then the other thing, obviously, is he took a wire brush to Nikki Haley in that statement. And I think that, and obviously there are going to be some of DeSantis supporters who are never Trumpers and who don't want to support Trump. But by and large, in terms of like issues, and I know that the DeSantis campaign tried to insert some issues to put some daylight between the two of them. But in terms of issues, there's very little, almost no real daylight, certainly no daylight on issues that are still pressing to people between DeSantis and Trump. And for that reason, I think all of, you know, a majority of those supporters do wind up going to Trump.
And looking at South Carolina, Guy Benson, let's pull up these numbers. So you have Trump already at majority support, 52%. Haley, 22%, of course, her home state. DeSantis has double-digit support there. You could see a universe where Trump aggregates something like 60% in Haley's home state.
And the question is, can she get a result here in New Hampshire that puts some wind in her sails, where she can then go home, work for about a month, and try to write her own comeback story on her home turf? That's what her campaign is obviously rooting for. I think we're already looking ahead to what comes next. I just want to linger for a moment on this huge outcome today, which is Ron DeSantis getting out of the race before New Hampshire even voted. Obviously, it's a huge disappointment relative to expectations. I think his high expectations were rooted in reality. You look back in late 22, early 23, he had a viable chance of becoming the nominee. I really think that after that New York indictment came down from Alvin Bragg in New York City, you started to see the polling average just pull away for Donald Trump. People rallied around Trump because they viewed that in particular as illegitimate, partisan. And so I'm not sure any campaign, even a flawless campaign, could have overcome that dynamic. But let's be honest, this was not a flawless campaign for the DeSantis team, right? And I think he's been a fabulous governor. I think that he could be a terrific president. But even the rollout of his campaign, very online, buggy, it kind of became a microcosm of some of the issues that he then suffered from. They had this weird, like, media strategy that didn't work out well. So here we are, down to a two-person race.
The postmortems will be written, and Guy Benson began writing his own for the DeSantis campaign just there.
Yes.
Great analysis.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.